Aurelius Blanca had everything a 42-year-old man could wish for. He was the owner of a chain of 17 restaurants spread across the entire state, and in business circles he was known as a man with a firm hand and a sharp mind. His name opened doors and his money solved problems. And yet, every night he returned to a silent and empty apartment. It turned out that he had more than he needed. It was not the loneliness of someone who had never tried. Aurelius had tried twice. Twice he had come close to marrying. Twice he had realized too late that the love he thought he had found was not for him, but for what he represented. The unlimited credit card, the last name in business, his photo in the magazines, the life he could offer. The last time the pain was different. 3 years of a relationship collapsed when, in a moment of carelessness, he overheard a conversation he was not supposed to hear. The voice of the woman he believed he loved was explaining to her friend that she tolerated his flaws because the money made up for everything. He stood in the hallway of the apartment with the key still in his hand, listening as each word fell to the floor like a fragment of glass. After that he closed a door inside himself. But one thought would not leave him. The restaurant Clara's Place was in the poorest neighborhood of the city. It was the first one Aurelius had opened 20 years ago when he was still not sure of anything. Today it was the smallest in the chain, the least profitable, but the only one where he could still smell the scent of a kitchen that reminded him of his grandmother's house. Garlic in hot oil, freshly baked bread, coffee whose taste stayed in your mouth for hours. He walked in through the back door on a Tuesday morning, dressed in jeans and a simple shirt, with an informal proposal for the unchanging Adam, a grey-haired man who had worked with him from the beginning. "I want to work here for 1 week as a waiter. No one should know who I am." Adam looked at him for a long time and then said simply, "You are going to break at least 3 plates, and possibly more." Aurelius smiled for the first time in several weeks. "Will you help me or not?" The first day almost became a catastrophe. The electronic order terminal seemed simple when he watched it from afar. In practice, when 4 tables were calling him at the same time, noise from pots and voices was coming from the kitchen, and co-workers were passing non-stop by his side. Aurelius stood in the middle of the dining room with a lost look, holding the device as if it were an object from another galaxy. The heat of that place was different from the air conditioning of the office, more humid, more real, and he felt his shirt sticking to his back. It was then that a calm voice sounded by his side. "First you put in the table number, then the dish, like this." He turned his head. Next to him was a woman in the same uniform shirt as his, her hair tied back with a simple band, her face without makeup, and dark eyes that looked at him with sincere patience, without mockery. "Thanks," he began, confused. "I am Laura," she said kindly. She took the device, showed him everything step by step twice, and gave it back to him. "Now you try." He tried. He got it right. Laura was already returning to her tables without waiting for thanks. During the next 3 days, Aurelius learned more about his own restaurant than he had learned in the last 5 years studying spreadsheets. He discovered that table 6 was too close to the kitchen exit, and every week it received complaints about the noise. He discovered that the coffee machine jammed if you did not wait 10 seconds between orders. He discovered that during the Tuesday lunch there was a rush between 11:30 and 12:15 that left the team exhausted. But above all, he met Laura. She was the most experienced waitress in the place. She had been working there for almost 6 years. She knew the menu by heart, she knew the names of the regular customers, and she remembered that Mr. Thomas at table 3 could not eat spicy food because of his stomach. She carried it all with a silent lightness that demanded no recognition and never received it. The newer cooks rolled their eyes when she suggested changing a process. The waiter Fabian always joked about her silence, saying she looked like a ghost wandering the dining room. One afternoon, during the break, Aurelius heard how 2 co-workers laughed at a comment that she really seemed to arrive early, leave late, and leave no trace. No one noticed that Aurelius stopped chewing his sandwich. It was Thursday when something changed between them. It was the end of the shift, the dining room almost empty, and Laura was alone arranging napkins in a corner of the bar. In the restaurant reigned that special end-of-day silence. The scrape of chairs against the floor, the smell of coffee mixed with cleaner, the distant television broadcasting news that no one watched. Aurelius approached to help without announcing it. He started to fold napkins next to her, and so they stayed for several minutes without saying a word. In that silence there was something he did not expect. It was not discomfort. It was the strange feeling of being in the right place. Until he asked without looking at her directly, "How long have you been putting up with this?" Laura froze for a second. Her hands rested still on the napkins. I do not understand the question. How they treat you, he chose his words carefully. Like you do not exist. She stayed silent. It was not the silence of an offended person. It was the silence of someone who needs time to realize that someone has finally seen her, and that being truly seen hurts in a different way than being ignored. I have gotten used to it, she said at last. Getting used to it does not mean accepting it, he replied. Laura looked at him from the corner of her eye for the first time. It was not the look of a waitress to a coworker on shift. It was the look of a person deciding if she could trust. You have been here less than a week, she said, and you asked me something no one has asked me in 6 years. He did not know what to answer. That sentence did not leave him the rest of the night while he lay in the too large silence of his apartment staring at the ceiling. On Friday, the incident happened. During lunch, a table of executives arrived. 4 men in suits in a neighborhood restaurant already drew attention. One of them asked to change the dish after having eaten half, then complained about the service time, and finally called the manager with a voice loud enough for the whole dining room to hear. The waitress at that table was Laura. Aurelius was 2 meters away. He heard how the man raised his voice. He saw how Laura stood there without defending herself, with that expression he had already learned to recognize. The expression of someone who has understood that reacting only makes things worse. Shoulders slightly hunched, chin down, gaze fixed on the floor as if the floor could offer an exit. He felt something tighten in his chest. It was not anger. It was recognition. The anger came right after. Adam was already appearing to fix everything as he always did, but before he arrived Aurelius was already next to the table. Can I help? He asked with that calm voice he used in board meetings. The executive looked at him like an annoying waiter. Can you bring me the bill? With much pleasure. Aurelius did not look away. But first I must inform you that I have followed the service from the beginning. The order was registered exactly as you asked. I can show you the receipt. The atmosphere at the table grew hot. Are you calling me a liar? I am saying that my coworker has done her job excellently. Aurelius's voice remained calm, but there was in it something that made people stop interrupting. A low temperature harder than any shout. If you are not satisfied with the dishes, I can solve it with the kitchen, but I am not going to stay quiet while a person who works well is treated as if she had made a mistake. The executive paid the bill without a discount and left muttering under his breath. When the table was empty, Laura appeared next to Aurelius, and the two watched the dining room return to its usual bustle as if nothing had happened. You did not have to do that, she said in a low voice. Yes, I did, he replied. She did not answer right away. For a moment she looked at the empty table as if she needed a second for something inside her to reorganize. When she turned her face, her eyes were dry, but in them there was an expression for which he could not find a name. It was not exactly gratitude. It was astonishment. A silent astonishment of someone who is not used to being defended. Saturday, the last day of the agreed week, they left work together for the first time. It was not planned. Laura was waiting for the bus on the corner, and Aurelius appeared by her side without fully understanding what he was doing. At the end of the day, there was that specific orange and tired city light, and the traffic noise drowned the silence between sentences. They stayed there an hour and a half talking on the sidewalk while 3 buses passed. She did not even move to get on any of them. She told him she had started working there when her father got sick, that the restaurant became her anchor in a moment when everything was falling apart, that with time she had learned to love that place. The smell of coffee in the morning, the customers who returned every month, the routine that seemed insignificant but that was hers. Aurelius listened to her with an attention he had not shown in many years. Not with the attention of someone waiting for his turn to speak, but with the attention of someone who does not want the other to stop talking. When the last bus on the schedule stopped on the corner, she grabbed the strap of her bag. Next week you will not be here anymore, right? He paused. Why do you think that? Because people who appear like this out of nowhere always disappear the same way. In her voice there was no bitterness, only an old and well-hidden truth that she had learned to accept. It has been nice working with you, she said, and got on the bus before he could respond. Aurelius stayed on the sidewalk watching as the rear lights of the vehicle disappeared around the corner. The city around him continued indifferent, and he was left with the strange feeling of having lost something before even understanding that he wanted to keep it. The following Monday, Aurelius appeared in the restaurant no longer as a waiter. He appeared as the owner. Adam gathered the team in the morning, something unusual. When Aurelius walked into the dining room in different clothes, with a different posture, without an apron and without a terminal in his hand, silence fell immediately. Laura was with the others, leaning against the bar with her arms crossed as she did when she was cold on the outside and thinking on the inside. The moment she recognized him was obvious. A minimal contraction of shoulders, eyes that opened a little wider, and then came the second moment. The moment of understanding. In that instant she stayed still with her breath a little shorter, like someone trying not to show that she had just received a blow. It was not betrayal yet. It was something more physical, more ancient. It was the body realizing that it was going to hurt. He addressed the team, explained the reason for his visit, announced the adjustments he was going to implement, and in front of everyone named Laura supervisor of the shift that had been vacant for several months, with the corresponding salary increase. Then he asked her for 5 minutes. They were in the back patio where the smell of the fryer came through and the muffled noise of the kitchen that never stopped. "Did you lie to me?" she asked before he could open his mouth. "Yes." He did not look away. "I needed to understand what was happening in my restaurants without anyone changing their behavior because of me. And her voice was low but firm, was I part of the experiment? You were the only part one did not plan." There was a short and honest pause. Everything that happened between us was not in the plans. Laura looked at him for a long time. In her eyes there was something he had learned to recognize in those days. The silent evaluation of someone who has been disappointed enough times to not grant the presumption of innocence so easily. "I need to think," she said at last. "I know. And you cannot appear like this in my life as a waiter, defend me in front of a difficult customer, make me miss 3 buses on the sidewalk, and then say you are the owner of all this as if it were the most normal thing in the world." He almost smiled but held back. "It is not normal. You are right. Thank you very much for accepting." She crossed her arms. "And now go to work." In the months that followed, Aurelius returned often to Clara's place without an apron and without hiding. He appeared on Saturdays when the flow of customers dropped, sat at the bar, ordered a coffee, and stayed. Laura, when she could, stayed on the other side talking between service and service. Slowly, without hurry, with the same patience with which she had taught him to use the terminal that first day. And when one day in November he finally asked her if she wanted to have dinner with him, not as boss and subordinate but as 2 people who had spent enough time truly getting to know each other, she replied, "You know I am going to choose the most expensive restaurant in the city, right?" "The one you want," he said. She chose Clara's place. He understood that it could not be any other way. And when they sat at table 6, the same one that was near the kitchen exit and that every week received complaints about the noise, neither of them complained about anything. The man who had hidden his name to find someone who would see him for Real met the woman who had never stopped being herself, even when no one was looking.